Alright, we are recording. Pulling up my notes again. So now actually at the introduction in Utopia, not just my book introduction thing. So this would be by Henry Morley, who is the editor. He does actually say who the translator is, so I got that wrong. But it is giving largely just an introduction by talking about More's history, at least leading up to and somewhat after More's history leading up to his writing Utopia, and then some history of Utopia following that. And does also mention, it was translated with more literary skill, because this wasn't the first English translation, by Gilbert Burnet in 1684, soon after he had conducted the defense of his friend Lord William Russell, attended his execution, vindicated his memory, and been spitefully deprived by King James II, of his lectureship at St. Clement's. Burnet was drawn to the translation of Utopia, but by the same sense of unreason in high places that caused More to write the book. Burnet's is the translation given in this volume. Okay, so... nope, come on. I want to just clean something up in the notes a little bit. There we go. Starting with the history here, there is something that I highlighted, because I do think it's kind of interesting. And it makes sense. It definitely makes sense at the time, and in a way I'd say it even would make sense to do now. That More... he was of a wealthy family, but after he had received early education, he did later go to college. But he was educated, was still a boy, and he was actually sent to the household of Cardinal John Morton, Archbishop of Canterbury and Lord Chancellor. Okay, and it explains that this was actually somewhat usual at the time, where the children of wealthy persons would be placed in these other households, where they would live as kind of a client to that person, that person then being their patron. And so they'd go around with their liveries, so that would be, like they had a crest or something like that, you would go around wearing that. But that then later, the patron used afterwards his wealth or influence in helping the young client forward in the future. Which is kind of something where it's like, I could see that actually being a good thing to try to bring back today. Where instead of it being... This would be more formal than what I think you would find today, at least in America, where it's like, no, that your family's supposed to help with that, no one else. Or you might end up forming some sort of connection, some sort of bond with a teacher or a professor who would then try to help you out. But this was much more formal than that. So, and it does actually talk about how Morton did like him, and where is it? He once said, "Whoever shall live to try it shall see this child here waiting at table prove a notable and rare man." And part of the reason why I highlighted the whole him being placed there, and also this next thing, is I think that is important context to understand when getting to some of what he describes for what goes on in Utopia. So, other thing he mentions, well, I actually didn't highlight some of this, but Henry VII apparently wanted Parliament to pass something that would, he had proposed a subsidy on account of the marriage portion of his daughter Margaret, and More opposed that so strongly that Parliament actually did deny it, making the king More's enemy for a while. But when he eventually did die, Henry VII died, and so apparently it ended with that. It wasn't carried on to Henry VIII. It also does mention that he would have preferred marrying More, that is, the second daughter of John Colt of New Hall in Essex, but chose her elder sister that he might not subject her to the discredit of being passed over. That is certainly a concept that is alien to people today, for better or worse. But it is also, Taming of the Shrew by Shakespeare is also displays that context, that story, where two young suitors, they want to marry these two daughters of this wealthy merchant, But there's still this elder sister who is the shrew, who basically no man can put up with. Now, granted, I've not actually read it, but I have seen various retellings. I've also seen the Elizabeth Taylor and I can't remember his name, but it's Elizabeth Taylor and her actual husband at the time also did a film of that. And then there is Kiss Me Kate, that is a musical version. But anyway, it is an interesting story. I do genuinely want to go through it. I want to go through a few Shakespeare stories actually, because it is an interesting study in psychology, I would say. I do understand why, because when I've looked up Taming the Shrew previously, I do understand why some people would describe it as misogynistic. I do understand why people would claim that. I would also say, at least based on that, the final scene in the Taming of the Shrew movie with Elizabeth Taylor, if assuming that's accurate to the play, no, it's not a misogynistic story. It is about the psychology. It is very much about the psychology of men and women, because she is an incredibly arrogant and proud woman, and the guy that these two suitors find to marry her is at least as stubborn as she is, and humbles her. And I think that that's some of that humbling. I can see there being people misinterpreting that as misogyny. And it is definitely ridiculous at some points, because there's like a scene where they're riding into town together, and another traveler comes up and is just, talking with them. It's like, talking about how nice the weather is. And she comments about how, and this is towards the end of the play, that, oh yes, it's such a nice, beautiful blue sky. And the husband just goes, no, what are you talking about? It's overcast. And she goes, oh yes, it is. How gray a day it is. And just, yes, that is a bit extreme, but it is also, he needs to be extreme with her. Okay, because he's still, at that point, he would still be trying to humble her so that she can't, just be humble. But in the finale, at least in the movie, so the two suitors have now married their two other daughters. And they're all they're married, so it's kind of the party, kind of the reception afterwards. But the men are in one room, the wives are in another, and with all the women. And they have a contest, essentially, to see, okay, who has the better wife, right? And so the two young suitors both, call a boy, a page, to go and summon their wives. And he goes, and both of them say, basically, say something along the lines of, if you want to see me, you can come to me then. I don't need to go to you. But when the guy who made the elder sister, when he has, because he's forced, he has to do the same thing, even though the expectation is he's also going to be embarrassed by this, that he seemingly has no control over his wife, as the other two have demonstrated. The page goes, she actually comes in dragging the two sisters, admonishing them for not being, for being so unresponsive and rude to their husbands. And is I really do want to read through that. I don't know when, but it is just, that's kind of the aspect of the humility that you were trying to get to. Now, and I could very much believe that after that, he would never do that stuff of saying, no, this is what's guys, because he knows it's unnecessary. She has been humbled and understands why she needed to be, right? And is now impressing that on her own sisters by dragging them in and casting them down to embarrass them, because you brought shame on your husband. You're not supposed to do that. That is wrong for you to do. You're being punished. Now I am embarrassing you. So, yeah, that concept, though, was clearly there in Shakespeare's time, that no, you don't pass over the elder daughter. That's inappropriate to do. That is embarrassing to her. So you do things to try to protect that, to try to protect against that. In this case, marrying not your first choice. Yeah. I get that is a weird thing today, but I guess the way to put it is, back then, my guess is there would be such a strong expectation for women to be married, and obviously then for men to be as well, though I'm not sure if there was the same kind of desire that the eldest brother marries first. Not sure about that. But that, women, they were expected to marry, that if one was, you then expect that, well, the first one eligible should be the first one married. The first one of age should be the first one to marry, so. Yep. And it probably would be seen as if a younger sister was, even though it could just be she just met the man she wants to marry very early, and the older sister hasn't yet. But still as nope, you were supposed to get married first. So, you're going to be embarrassed now by that, so. And he probably even talks about how no man wants you kind of stuff, which, yeah, that would be harsh. But it's still just say... I'm just thinking, like, as a man, it would be weird, that idea that I love you, but you have an older sister, so I'm going to marry her instead. That's just weird. And I don't know how I don't know if I could wrap my head around it. I'm like doing that myself, but anyway, moving on. Okay, I already read that about the translation. Is there anything else in here? Oh, yeah, I should have also mentioned that. That would speak to his character and where he's coming from, which would be informative for when we get to into the meat of the story. Moore's earnest character caused him, while studying law, to aim at the subduing of the flesh by wearing a hair shirt, so that, I'm not sure what kind of hair necessarily, but it would be an uncomfortable shirt. I think sometimes it would also be depicted as stiff, but it would certainly be itchy. It would not be comfortable, certainly not like what I'm wearing. And that's also why you do see in some biblical stories, prophets and such being described as in like camel's hair and such, because it is uncomfortable, but they are not concerned with the desires of the flesh, they're concerned with God's will. So it's and that's even potentially why he would choose that. Not just that practically it is serving that purpose, but also as kind of a connection back to those stories. But yeah, by wearing a hair shirt, taking a log for a pillow. Depending on the shape of the log, I could probably handle that one, but that would not be comfortable. I'm fortunate that I'm not that sensitive to what I sleep on. Like, I know there are people where it's like, no, it has to be firm mattress. No, it has to be soft. Not like that for me. And whipping himself on Fridays. I believe the term for that is a penitent. And it is, if you've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where you see the guys walking through, and they are... Do I have something good for doing that with? Not really. Well, hang on. I need to move some stuff. I got a clipboard down here. What was it? Donde esse requiem. Oh, I don't remember the rest of it, but they just go like that constantly, while praying. Sorry, when I was moving stuff out of the way, something popped off. Just a rubber grommet thing. That was a real practice. And because the context for it in the movie is like it's during a time of plague. And yeah, they were trying to be so penitent that hopefully God would then decide, okay, the plague is no longer needed. It can, pass on. And yeah, you would have seen it. I'm not sure how much the wooden head bashing you necessarily would have seen, but for a movie, it's a lot better. I mean, just is because you got not only the visual, everybody understands the premise there, as far as like you're hurting yourself, but also that sound just constantly. Yeah. But no, you would have also had people whipping themselves and like legitimately going through town, parading through town. Many of them whipping themselves to try to show that their penance, that trying to be penitent. Repenting for their sins, so hopefully the ill would pass. But he was just apparently doing this as a form of physical and mental discipline, which, I mean, that really tells you a lot about the character of this man. That he would be that concerned with these with those things, that he wanted that kind of discipline and would suffer such injury onto himself. Because I could believe that if you don't do that right, you could really harm yourself. And also that back then I could see there was the desire to cause harm. Like today, I believe plenty of people, if you had them doing that, they'd be doing with something that it would hurt, but it wouldn't necessarily leave wounds. But I believe back then, no, you would do something so that the wounds were at least possible. I don't know, it doesn't really say there, but it is I could believe that. And it was just for the discipline, it seems like. And also, not just also discipline to be a disciple. I think is a favorite way to put it. Not just the physical, mental discipline, but also for that purpose. It's like also why it would be on Friday. Yeah, because, for Good Friday and, repeating things then. And, the whole tradition of not eating meat on Friday, so abstaining from meat on Friday. That all would align with that. I got nothing more. I do kind of want to keep talking, but I don't know about what, so I guess I should just stop. But yeah, the introduction here, not too long. So next will be... Oh, it does mention a little bit that we do see in Utopia, like some things that he had heard, that he had learned at when he was a client to Morton. That some things he probably learned from Morton or heard around Morton's table, he also put into Utopia. And that you would especially see it in the first chapter. So yeah, we'll be seeing that shortly then. All right, that should be it. One more thing I will add. I mentioned Taming of the Shrew. One of the other stories I do want to read, and it's probably because I'm seeing something right there. That another one of the plays, Shakespeare's plays, I would want to read would be The Tempest, because that's one that a lot of other stories are also based on. So right there, I've got Forbidden Planet. Also, the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is also based on The Tempest. So yeah, I do want to go through that as well. But yeah, and I don't know if I would necessarily do those as signed reading. And I could, it's possible. But I do have other stories I want to get to first. So, and hey, it may also be interesting with Taming of the Shrew, because as I said, I've not actually read it itself. I've only seen movie renditions of it, so it would be interesting to actually read it and see if my impression of what was going on there is accurate, or if how other people interpret it in a negative light is more accurate. It would be interesting to do that. I just don't know when. I've got, let me see, I want to do that. There's some film novelizations I want to do. I know I keep doing film novelizations for signed reading, but so I got some of those, and I know I've got some Tolkien stuff I want to go through. I mean, it's like so much stuff I want to go through before I want to get to that. Anyway, and I also mentioned, because I have purchased some of the cover impression, the books I've found in cover impression videos. I do also want to do a signed reading of those. So, so many things. At least I enjoy doing this. See you next time.